Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the beaches were copper, the pince-nez was golden, and the blaze was silver, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder about the difference between Holmes's pipes? Or how often he smokes cigars versus cigarettes? Or what Egyptian cigarettes are like?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 467, Calling Cards. Hello there, and welcome to Trifles, the podcast where we talk about the minutiae in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, do you have a calling card ready to present to me?
I do.
Let me squint through the microphone here.
No, I mailed it about 90 minutes ago. Let's just sit and wait for it to arrive.
Oh, perfect. Well, I won't be able to speak to you until I receive the card then.
Good. That's the very idea I had in mind.
Indeed. Well, this show was inspired by a listener comment. Christian Boehner from Germany said he was interested in learning about calling cards. And he said, in the short stories, a lot of calling cards showed up, but never one of Sherlock Holmes himself. How frequently were calling cards in the late 19th century? And how would Holmes's calling card look like? Well, Christian, we're glad you asked that, and glad that you brought that up. We will bring some much-needed elucidation to this trifling topic in this episode ahead. For folks who'd like to support us, you can do that in a few ways. We have Patreon and Substack. You can check both of those out in the show notes. The links are there. Just patreon.com/trifles, trifles.substack.com. And if you go to ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise, you can find mugs and notepads with the Trifles logo on them and a wonderful saying that accompanies them. So check those out. All the proceeds of that help to support the show, and you get a wonderful physical memory of what we do here. Maybe that's too painful, given that the audio memories that we send you every week are constantly with you. But if you'd like to show other people what it is that you enjoy, then please check out our merch store. Well, we find ourselves in the world of calling cards. You know, Bert, it seems to me that business cards, calling cards, etc., are almost extinct at this point. They were a part of the business world, certainly, and far before that, the social world, to identify people. But given that we connect with each other digitally and have our profiles everywhere, it's almost superfluous.
Yeah, and therefore we should be diving into it with both hands and investing in business cards and keeping this tradition alive.
Please.
You know, I'm reminded by a line in an old movie where, well, not all that old a movie, where one a butler says to his very feckless employer, "Sir, you have dedicated your life to keeping alive customs that were dead long before you were born." And I don't see anything wrong with that. But
agree.
you're right. These days on a business side, certainly, you already have the contact information for the person you're talking to in their email or in their text message. And, it's easy just to transfer these things around digitally. But on the other hand, in the Sherlockian world, many of us still have calling cards that, occasionally we like to hand out to friends and people that we meet just to make things a little easier.
Yeah, I have a friend who had specific cards made up. And look, you can get cards made up so easily now, whether it's at a site like Vistaprint or moo.com. And you can customize them with a logo, with photos, with your own design. And, it's endless, the things that you can do. But I have a friend who used to travel on airplanes a lot. And when she got to her seat, she wanted to focus on what she needed to do, whether it was working on her laptop or reading or just catching a few winks. And she had a card made up. It didn't have her name on it, didn't have any contact information on it. It was just 2 words that she could hand to her seatmate to indicate that she wanted some quiet time. And the card simply said, "Stop talking." You could have a whole set of those made up with all kinds of different phrases.
Well, I like that. One of my favorite, I would say 2 things about that. One is I used to work with someone who was on an airplane at one point, and which involved a trip where she had to change planes. And in the course of that, she was given a card to put on her seat, which said, "Seat reserved for a through passenger." And she took that with her and hung it on the door of her office, indicating her less than eternal commitment, I think, to her position. But the other one is remember Marjorie Allingham had a series of books written about Albert Campion. And Albert Campion had a calling card that I loved. And years ago, a girlfriend of mine gave me a box of engraved cards with my name on it. And Albert Campion's motto was just a few words, a few lines on his card. Albert Campion with his address: "Coups neatly executed, nothing sordid, vulgar, or plebeian. Deserving cases preferred. Police, no object."
I love that card. I've got one of those cards of yours. I've cherished it.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
that's an antique.
Clever one. It is.
Yeah.
But when we look into the Sherlock Holmes stories, in the very first story, in A Study in Scarlet, Holmes and Watson go to visit Constable John Rance, who was on duty when Drebber's body was found, and that was over in the Brixton Road. And Holmes managed to relay to Rance his motions that evening. He walked around the room several times, knelt by the body, etc. And Rance was alarmed. And it seems to me, he says, "It seems to me you know more about this case than you should." And Holmes laughed and threw his card across the table to the constable. And saying, "Don't get arresting me for the murder. I'm one of the hounds and not the wolf."
Yeah, well, that's a lovely example there. So instead of saying, "You don't recognize me, I am Sherlock Holmes," he gives him his card, which theoretically Rance will recognize the name. But also the card, in Victorian England particularly, this was all part of etiquette. There's a set of unwritten rules for how people are supposed to behave. Like, saying please and thank you and being on time and not interrupting. And it's basically good manners or knowing how to act appropriately. And the calling card was part of this highly engineered and sophisticated system of communication in Victorian England that revolved around introducing one person to another. And so there was a set of rules, but and also a lot was communicated in the card itself, what it said on it and how it was presented and engraved and printed and so on, and the quality of the paper. Holmes is forever looking at bits of paper he receives, like the note in Scandal in Bohemia from the King of Bohemia, in which he deduces a lot because of the source of the paper. But all of this was, sort of part of it, and that's the first example of a business, of a calling card in the Sherlockian canon in that first case.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful paragraph from a site called Hoban Cards. This is from their blog from 2016. Talking a little bit about the history and the relevance here. They say the earliest uses of calling cards, or at least something like them, reach as far back as ancient Egyptians, who left ceramic tiles in their temple of worship. It depicted its owner's name and title. And calling cards, also called visitor cards or visiting tickets, or compliments cards, originated in their paper and ink form in France in the 18th century. And that spread across Europe and the UK, of course, and calling cards became essential social accessories for the fashionable and wealthy, and served as utilitarian objects as well as status symbols. And if you left your card at a friend's home, it was a way to express appreciation for a recent dinner party, or to offer condolences for an illness, or just to say hello. If the recipient wasn't home, a servant would accept a calling card, or the card would be left on a silver tray, called a salver, in the entrance hall. And a tray full of calling cards was like social media for the Victorian era, a way to advertise who was in one's extended social circle. Often the cards of the wealthiest or most influential people were purposefully displayed at the top of the stack to impress future visitors. Now, that notion of leaving a card when you've missed the person, there's a wonderful opening scene in one of the short stories. You know which one I'm thinking of?
No.
Charles Augustus Milverton.
Ah. Oh, okay.
Holmes and Watson were out for a walk. They came back, and there was a card left there. It said, "Will call again at 6:30 c.a.m."
Ah, bum, bum, bum.
Yes, and that's where Watson gets his first taste of Holmes's distaste for Charles Augustus Milverton.
Interesting, too, the size of these cards. I think a man's calling card like that in England at the time was about the size of a playing card, and you carried it around in a carrying case. There's a card case in Study in Scarlet that's found on the body of, who is it, Stangerson?
I think it was Drebber.
Drebber's body, a card case of Russian leather. So you'd carry around a card case, and the card, about the size of a playing card, would have the man's name and later on his address. And the name was in the center, sometimes with a middle initial and sometimes not. And a young man did not put Mr. A military officer would include his rank and his branch of service. A physician could include his professional title. But honorary titles like professor or the honorable or esquire were not acceptable. And sometimes the card included the name of the club, the gentleman's club, or organization that the gentleman belonged to. And, so there's all this stuff that goes into the design and production of these little bits of paper that introduce one person to another.
Yeah, and if one carried cards, obviously the best way to carry them would be in that card case, like found on the body of Drebber. But the card case we find over the course of the canon also serves another utilitarian method, and that is if someone rips off a piece of paper and hands it to you, well, you can fold that piece of paper up and put it into your card case and use it as a carrying mechanism for those bits of paper. We see in the lion's mane where Holmes had a note that had been found. "I will be there, you may be sure. Maudie." And he shared that with the constable, and the constable replaced it in the card case and returned it with the other things to the pockets of the Burberry. So somebody was keeping that note safe on them in that particular instance, and the card case was what was used. And there's a few other instances like that as well, where the card case became the storage mechanism for a note.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. Now,
There's also... Oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that there's also an old etiquette around the treatment of the card. So let's say that in the 19th century, a gentleman calls on another gentleman, or it might have just applied to women. But if it's it has to do with the turning down of the card's corners. So if you're making a visit in person, as opposed to being sent by a servant, you'd turn down the right-hand upper corner of the card. And if it was a congratulatory visit, there was the left-hand upper corner. And if it was a cold condolence visit, it was the left-hand lower corner. And if you were hitting the road and going on a long trip and just came to say goodbye, it would be the right-hand lower corner. And if there were two or more ladies, I guess this is a gentleman calling on a lady, and if there were two or more ladies in the household, the gentleman turned down a corner of the card to indicate the call was designed for the whole family. Oh. And there's all this stuff that you could add by your treatment of the card.
Well, and if you wanted to write on the card as well, like Milverton did, you could use simple abbreviations, initials, to indicate the reason for your visit. So PF, for example. Naturally, PF means congratulations.
Absolument, mon vieux. Yeah. Pour féliciter en français. So this is all the French influence.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. From that, as we said, the French popularized the visiting cards in the 18th and 19th centuries, and their notation system was carried over as well. So PR would mean that you are calling the press on somebody.
That's right. Here's my press release.
No, PR is thank you, expressing one's thanks, and that is in French.
Pour remercier.
Oh, you said it way better than I could. PC means you're criticizing the person for being too politically correct. No, that is mourning. It's an expression in mourning. Pour condolence.
Pour condoléances.
Condoléances. Okay, there you go. PFNA. I don't even want to guess this one. This is...
I can't wait till we get to OMG. Pour féliciter Nouvel An. It's PFNA. Nouvel An. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. PPC.
PPC means, this is a terrible typo, I want the water closet. No, it means... I'm meaning to take my leave pour prendre congé. So it's PPC congé.
And, this is a shorter version when you're really in a hurry. PP.
PP. Bye-bye.
That's the urgent use of the water closet. Yeah. I'm out of here. It's if you want to be introduced to anybody, you send your visiting card in pour présenter.
Présenter,
yes. So those are all quick notations. If you're not part of the fold family, or maybe there's a fold and an initial, and you're expressing your desire to be introduced to the whole family, for example. But it's interesting, all of the social constructs that came with these, and one would be expected to know not only how to present oneself, but also how to receive someone.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful paragraph from JaneAusten'sWorld.com on the etiquette of using calling cards. To the unrefined or underbred, the visiting card is but a trifling and insignificant piece of paper. But to the cultured disciple of social law, it conveys a subtle and unmistakable intelligence. Its texture, style of engraving, and even the hour of leaving it combine to place the stranger, whose name it bears, in a pleasant or disagreeable attitude, even before his manners, conversation, and face have been able to explain his social position. The higher the civilization of a community, the more careful it is to preserve the elegance of its social forms. It's quite easy to express a perfect breeding in the fashionable formality of cards as by any other method, and perhaps indeed it is the safest herald of an introduction for a stranger. Its texture should be fine, its engraving a plain script, its size neither too small so that its recipients shall say to themselves, a whimsical person, nor too large to suggest ostentation. Refinement seldom touches extremes in anything.
Lovely.
And that is from Our Deportment by John H. Young in 1879.
Yeah. See, you see what we have lost. We've lost this subtle, in this whatever you really want to do culture. Whatever makes you happy, dress like you're comfortable. Except don't wear PJs on the airplane, apparently. we have to draw the line somewhere, I guess.
Yes. You should wear your exercise clothes now if you're at the airport. That's good etiquette for doing pull-ups in the airport.
Oh, well, that's great.
You can't do pull-ups in your tuxedo, you see.
Well, that's true. The problem is you've got to hunt on the floor for your studs because once they pop off your shirt, and they roll around.
Oh, goodness.
I've been on flights where they've had to delay boarding because somebody was looking for their studs after doing pull-ups at the
It happens.
At the boarding.
It happens to the worst of us. Well, we will have some images of various Victorian calling cards, some that are very plain and straightforward, others that are intricate and exquisite and colorful. Those will be available on Substack and on Patreon for our paying supporters. So if you'd like to see those and see what they look like, check it out. Meanwhile, let's look at a few other instances of calling cards and their use in the canon. One of the things we didn't mention is we did mention the tray in the hallway, but we didn't mention the salver that is usually brought in. And we see this first in the Sign of the Four, when Watson is berating Holmes over his cocaine use. He said, I opened my mouth to reply to this tirade when, with a crisp knock, our landlady entered bearing a card upon a brass salver. A young lady for you, sir, she said. Miss Mary Morstan, he read. I have no recollection of the name. Ask the young lady to step up, Mrs. Hudson.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who's seen a period drama has seen the butler or the maid come up with this little either circular or rectangular silver tray with simply a single card on it. And the person will take the card from the tray and read it, probably put it back down on the tray and dismiss the servant and ask the person to step in.
Yes, but here it's brass. It's a brass salver because Mrs. Hudson can't really afford silver, I suppose. Or because her other tenants have just stolen all the silver salvers, and that's the only one left.
They zip in off of Baker Street where the tray is and snatch the silver tray and then back out onto the street again. Yeah. But Mrs. Hudson appears again in the second stain. Mrs. Hudson had appeared with the lady's card upon her salver. Holmes glanced at it, raised his eyebrows, and handed it over to me. That was Lady Trelawney Hope. And then another lady, Frances Carfax, in that story, a card had come up upon a salver. and it was followed by the same bearded ruffian who had attacked me in the street. That was the Honorable Philip Green. But those are the only instances of a mentioned salver with respect to bringing a card up. And I think there may have been other instances, if I am not mistaken. Which story was Lord Cantlemere in? Was that Mazarin Stone?
Lord Cantlemere, I don't remember.
Yes, there was an inrush of police. The handcuffs clicked. The criminals were led to the waiting cab. Watson lingered with Holmes, congratulating him on this fresh leaf added to his laurels. Once more, their conversation was interrupted by the imperturbable Billy with his card tray. Lord Cantlemere, sir.
There you are, yes. Well, and we have got other cards that appear, particularly in sign of 4, where Jonathan Small is busy leaving cards with, the reminder about the sign of 4 on the people who he's shuffled off the planet. And those cards appear, but my favorite, I think, is the card that, it just shows you how elaborate Victorian etiquette was. The card that was used by the goose in the Blue Carbuncle to introduce itself and where it was supposed to go, since it couldn't communicate that itself. And that was really, I think, because the etiquette, of course, the whole problem is that, with those sorts of feet, a goose, it's very difficult to turn down the corners and to write anything like initials on a card, much less, wrap it around your neck with a string, is just outside the bounds of most foul.
Yeah, and, when a goose is wandering the streets of London, I mean, look, it's not taken the examination of the knowledge that the cabbies have. So its knowledge of London streets are limited.
Right.
And if a goose has a card on its leg that indicates its destination, well, then it really won't have to honk as much.
That's true. Well, and if you happen to be a bear from Peru, it's very useful to come to London with a card that says, please look after this bear, because it just saves a whole lot of bother with the introduction.
Yeah. Now, one of the really interesting instances of calling cards that sticks out to me is in the illustrious client. Holmes has been beaten to a pulp by Baron Gruner's henchmen. And he's planning with Watson about how to infiltrate Gruner's place. And he lets Watson know that Gruner is a collector of Chinese pottery and suggests that Watson study up on it. And then when Watson's prepared, Holmes handed him a card that was printed with Dr. Hill Barton, 369 Half Moon Street. And that's your name for the evening, Watson. Now, I've often wondered whether this was a card that Holmes had printed up, almost, like a print on demand kind of thing, if he had a stationer locally that did this for him. If this was simply a catalog of alias cards that he kept, or if it was actually his doctor at some point, and who didn't know his name was being used for nefarious purposes.
Or a former client from many years ago.
Yeah, a client who didn't pay. Right? That'll fix him.
Well, a client for whom the case result was sad and is now no longer with us. And so therefore it's completely free to use this particular card.
Yeah. Well, and in that very same story, Holmes went to visit the Baron, and Watson asked if he recognized him, and Holmes said, well, there was no difficulty about that, for I simply sent in my card.
Holmes, you amaze me.
Oh. You were expecting a goose, I presume?
Well, it's just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
We'll call again at 6:30 CAM.